Jean-Luc Grand-Pierre, how you doing? It's good to chat with you again.
All right, great to see you. Well, nice to be on. Thank you. I know it was a long overdue, but hey, we finally made it happen here.
All good. No, yeah, I was just gonna say it's been a few years since we've done something like this, and I think it's going on 3 years for you since you started with Bally Sports doing the pre and post game for the Blue Jackets. So, how excited are you for this upcoming season?
Super excited. Obviously, I would say with the big signing this summer with Johnny Gaudreau, knowing Patrick Laine is going to be here for the foreseeable future. The growth of the young guys and then the young guys coming in this season, there's definitely an excitement around the arena, around the organization. And that new locker room is fantastic, and I cannot wait to step in there and check it out because I ran into Jack Roslovic the other day in a restaurant, and he was just absolutely raving about it. So I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, hockey is almost here. I feel like in some ways, I feel like the summer kind of took a while, but at the same time, it goes fast. And here we are, training camp is a few weeks away, really. So, but before we get into some of the stuff ahead with the season, I was curious, what did you do this summer to kind of wind down from last season?
So I was supposed to go to Hawaii with my family, and then I missed out on that trip because I was covering the playoffs there with TNT. So that was a good, I guess it was if I were about to miss a trip, that was definitely an opportunity I was not going to pass on. But made up for it later in the summer. Went to Mexico, and then we actually went to Cuba. Believe it or not, I went to Cuba for like 4 nights in July just to check it out. My son wanted to see that for his 18th birthday, so we took him out there, and then that's pretty much it. Covered the draft in Montreal. That was a lot of fun to be back home, obviously, and finally see a draft live in person with a bunch of people in the building. So, but beside that, just as much golf as I could and just relaxing.
There you go. That's a full summer right there. That's awesome with all the
Yes.
traveling, like you said, doing the TNT, the playoff game with and Jody Shelley was with you doing that broadcast too. How awesome was that for you?
It was nerve-wracking, but it was a lot of fun. You learn so much from working with all kind of different people, and then obviously every network does thing a little differently. So it was really interesting because we had two different producers and directors for the two games we had there. So it was, the minute you adjust to somebody new, the game's over, and then next game you jump on with someone else. So, but it was a lot of fun.
It is interesting because I recognize a lot of the faces, the voices from watching NHL TV having all the different games. So I'm like, oh, I recognize this person. I know who that person is. So really cool to see that. I'll go ahead and get started with some of the main Blue Jackets questions I was curious about and thinking about. So obviously you mentioned the draft back in Montreal in July. I think it was a pretty solid draft from what I'm hearing, what all the experts have been saying, like David Jiricek, Denton Mateychuk. Those two are one of the top two defensemen that the Blue Jackets picked up, or the 6th and 12th pick that the Jackets had. But what did you think about their draft class?
I really like it because they addressed something that not only is needed in the foreseeable future, but something that, according to their draft board, those were the best players available. And for me, Jiricek, it was definitely a great pick. He's a big defensive defenseman. He can play a load of offense as well, but he's a right-handed D, which we know the Blue Jackets desperately need right now. So hopefully we see him with the big team in the next couple of seasons. And then as far as Denton Matchuk, for him, I spoke to a lot of people when I was in Montreal, and a lot of people had him as the second best defenseman available. Definitely the number one North American defenseman. So for the Blue Jackets to be able to snag him at 12, I think that's something that, yes, he's going to need a little bit more development, but you have to understand it was it was barely his draft year. When he got drafted, he was still 17 years old. He didn't turn 18 till later in July. So he's still like 9, 8 months younger than everyone else that pretty much got drafted. So if he were to enter the draft next season, he probably, could be probably a top five. So I think that was a steal there as well.
Yeah, I know it's rare for a team to take two defensemen within the top 12 of the draft. So from what I've heard and like what you just said, it sounds very exciting for what they're bringing in from a defensive aspect. Yeah, do you think David Jiricek? Do you think there's any chance that he could be on the Blue Jackets at some point this season, or are you thinking Cleveland and let him season down there?
Never say never.
Right, yeah.
I know they're not going to force him into the lineup. The Blue Jackets, is a team that they have enough depth right now that if he's equal or not quite as ready as another player, they'll probably just send him back to Czech Republic or the American League to keep developing. There's no sense in rushing him right now. But again, this is a team that last season when they picked Kent Johnson and Cole Sillinger, nobody thought Sillinger would be here and spend his rookie year in the NHL. And there we are a year later, and he played 79 games already. So it's kind of crazy. You never know how a player is going to surprise you. And the centerman position that he played at is extremely complicated, just like playing defense. So maybe he'll surprise people, but I don't think it's in the plans right now to keep him with the team.
Talking about Cole Sillinger, actually, as you mentioned, a really big first season for him in the NHL, already 79 games into his career and looking to see how he takes that next step. But I was curious too, with Cole, what did you like from what you saw last season? Were you surprised by maybe how quickly it seemed to kind of work out with him and, getting acquainted with the NHL on a nightly basis? Or were you thinking, well, he proved it basically in training camp, and here he is proving it again on a nightly basis?
Well, what I like about him is, he's not, most centers are not flashy. He's got that old school to him. I don't want to say like he reminds me of a Boone Jenner because he doesn't quite remind me of Boone Jenner, but he's one of these guys that plays to be 18 and play two-way defense like he did last season as a centerman. It's a big task, and a lot of time you see centermen coming in the league, they convert them into wingers early, and then maybe 3, 4 seasons later, they go back to their natural position. For him to be a true center all season long is really what surprises me the most. And at the end of the year, you look and he's got 16 goals, but I didn't care about the offensive output. I was really just more looking at, how responsible he was in his zone, and just physically was so ready for the NHL. That was something that definitely helped him. Some people had some question about his skating abilities. I didn't see it. Yes, is it? It's no Connor McDavid. He's not going to be confused for a Connor McDavid anytime soon. But he gets where he needs to. He can get where he needs to get, no problem. And he's so smart that he can avoid over skating on some plays. So for me, I was really surprised by his defensive play more than the daz and flash that you see from some rookies that come to the league and score 30 goals our first season.
Yeah, and he was a guy that wasn't afraid to kind of mix it up at times. I'm not saying he was getting the fights necessarily, but he was getting into involved when he had to. He wasn't shying away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, the league is not what it was in the 80s or in the 90s, but you're still an 18-year-old playing against men, and some of these men are trying to hurt you and they'll try to run you off the rink. And even after, I think it was Sam Bennett in Florida that ran him over, he didn't really skip a beat. And when that hit happened, I was like, oh boy. But next game he was back in the lineup, right back at it, and didn't back off in front of anyone. And that shows a lot of guts for an 18-year-old, and obviously you get the respect of his teammates as well.
Do you have any good or funny stories from having played with his dad, Mike, back in the day?
His dad was actually one of my favorite people. He's yeah, do I have any great stories? Probably too many. Some that I probably wouldn't tell on this podcast, but I can tell you
Right,
that
right.
he was he's a wonderful golfer. And last time I texted with him, he said he was pretty mad because Cole and his buddies just clean his pocket on the golf course. So I assume that Cole's even a better golfer than Mike, his dad, ever was. So he's
Well,
not
there
too
you
happy
go.
about that.
And apparently he can throw a baseball too, because he just threw the first pitch for the Guardians the other day. So
Yeah, I saw that. There's, yeah, I think it was about 22 miles an hour, but it was dead center. So that's a strike.
there you go. There you go. It's all that matters. Just get that ball over the plate. You'll be good.
That's right.
So with Kent Johnson, so obviously he came up late, in April, towards the end of the season, got a cup of coffee in the NHL, had 3 assists, so he's still looking for his first goal. But beyond just the point totals, What did you think about Kent Johnson's game? We've been hearing his name going back to Michigan international play. He just basically scored. He won the gold for Canada in the World Juniors back in August with the golden goal in overtime. So I know it's been 9 games. There's still a full season, his rookie season basically ahead. But what did you like, or what did you notice about Kent Johnson that maybe stuck out to you as you're watching him play out his first few NHL games?
The one thing I notice, especially for a player like this, they're extremely smart. And Kent Johnson is not a guy that you're going to see on the ice that's going to go from one end of the ice to the other, you know, full speed, toe drags, and kill people. He's a guy that is not the fastest, but he's extremely smart at analyzing what's going on around him. What I noticed in his 9 games is we saw some little subtle plays that he did here and there, whether it was getting the puck out of his zone or entering the zone, but he was still very hesitant. You didn't see an immediate impact, offensively from him, which he's used to. And I think he was just trying to soak it in, the NHL and how are people playing in, every shift after shift. It's easy to go in and, play against college age people or juniors because you're so talented. But then now all of a sudden you're in the best league in the world and you kind of have to relearn a little bit how to play the game. And that's why I think those 9 games were so important to him because now this year he's been through it, got more experience this summer with the U20s, and he's going to be ready at training camp this year. So a lot of people, you look at last year, you're like, well, he didn't score a goal. It doesn't matter to me. You're just trying to get him in that atmosphere. So this year, when the season starts, it's not a shock. And he can start, ready from day one instead of 10, 15, 20 games. So for me, what I saw from him last year, not that much, honestly, but I did watch him in the Olympics. I did watch him in the World Juniors, and it's a guy that even when he played in the Olympics against men, he was supposed to be on that fifth or sixth line, and somehow he found himself, you know, moving up, and then all of a sudden he was a regular on that team and put quite a bit of points. Honestly, it's just he's that smart and that talented that he's gonna find his way into the lineup no matter what, and it's gonna be the same thing with Columbus this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was talking with Scott Wheeler of the Athletic a few months ago, and I was asking him whether he thought he saw Johnson as more of a center or a winger because we've kind of heard both a little bit. Going into the future, maybe center could be in the picture, but he was saying that he thought that coaches would probably see him as more of a winger. He might be a little bit. I don't want to say small for a center, but more or less, I guess, along the lines with the sizing. But do you think, I know it's early, who knows? I mean, like we just said, 9 games into his career, but do you think center could be in the picture for him down the road, or are you thinking probably a winger as well?
Down the road, probably will play center at some point, but if I were to guess, like for this season, they'll probably put at center in the rookie camp here that's starting. But once the real camp starts, probably put him on the wing, maybe some exhibition game, play a few shifts at center. But I don't think he's, you look at the center situation there, so you would have to beat out Sillinger, Roslovic, Jenner, and Corrali. I honestly don't see it happen right now.
Yeah.
So I would definitely put him on the wing less. He doesn't have to worry so much about the defensive part of the game. And you can't kid ourselves. He hasn't played center in the last 3 seasons, probably, because I think at Michigan he was playing the wing all along. So maybe he played a couple of shifts at center, but you can't just all of a sudden pick up center in the best league in the league overnight and be like, all right, I'm going to be a center.
Yeah, right. So possibly down the road. Yeah,
Yeah.
figure the same way wing this year. And yeah, I think the other question, I guess, I think we see him as more of a top six guy in the lineup, obviously. But do you think they might even settle, have him play lower in the lineup just to kind of get the bearings straight, or think like we have this skill, let's utilize it the best way it's gonna, help him?
For this season,
Yeah,
oh, okay. Long term, obviously, he's
yeah, yeah,
definitely going to be a top two. There's no doubt about it. This season, I'd like to see him anywhere from the first to the third line. But honestly, even the fourth line, when you look at today's hockey, the fourth line is really not what it used to be. But you still want that fourth line to be more of a hard to play against character line. So probably a top three line, and it'll be fighting for a second line spot for sure. But right now, if I were to excuse me, pencil him in, I would probably put him as a third line. But again, that's why there's training camp. He could raise some eyebrows, and sometimes you see teams right after training camp starting to make trades just because somebody opened their eyes that much and they want to make a bigger spot for him in the lineup. So that's your job going into a training camp as a young guy.
I think obviously one of the big question marks and really what's gonna, tell the story in a sense this season, of course, is the team defense kind of improving upon last year, the record-setting 297 goals allowed. So, I mean, in your mind, do you think they did enough to address the D? Because obviously they bring in Eric Goodbranson, but it's more or less, some guys are gone, but it's more or less the same overall unit on the blue line. But it's also another year overall NHL experience, a second year in Larson's system. On the one hand, you probably aren't going to give up that many goals again, but also, do you think it's enough to, you know, take that necessary step for this season?
That's going to be really interesting. That's the one thing that the big question marks when you look at this team this year is defensively, have they done enough? You bring the Brenson, yes, is going to help defensively, physically for sure. But as a group, I think this team needs to block more shots or allow less shots on net because, there was Arizona and then the Columbus Blue Jackets were number two team that allowed more than 35 shots per game this season, which is kind of crazy when you really think of that number. So for me, it's going to be commitment. Yes, David Savari's gone. He used to block tons of shots, but let's not kid ourselves. We saw Andrew Peak block just as many in that second half of the
Yeah.
season. So I think as a group, we're talking the forwards, the centers, the defensemen. They just need to be a little more tight in their defensive zone but still play some offense. And I feel like last season uh, they got away from it, but you have to remember it's a new system, a lot of new
Yep.
players, a new coaching staff. So it was not just Brad Larson that was going. A lot of the coaches left after John Tortorella, so it's a whole new coaching staff. In their first season, they did fantastic, especially offensively. But now on the defensive side of the puck, you need to help your goaltender.
Obviously, as you just said, there's different coaching systems, and obviously, I know Torts and Larson, for instance. Obviously with Torts, you think of defense or things like that. What I'm curious about, and obviously you being in the NHL back in the day, how different are coaches' systems more or less? I remember when Max Domi was with Columbus, they were talking at times about is he adjusting to Torts' system or things like that, but is it I don't wanna say are they all the same, I know they're not all the same, but are they more or less similar? And then, of course, each coaching staff has their specific wrinkle, or are they drastically different across the board depending on who you're looking at? Obviously, I know offense, defense might be different, but
Right. I mean, the largest difference that you will see, and I would have to think of which teams are like that. Usually, you play some kind of zone defense, right? But some coach like to utilize the basketball man on man, where you have your guy and you're following him everywhere, and that creates a lot of confusion. When you go to a system like that for a team, and that's not necessarily what the Blue Jackets did last year, but I don't think the system was that different under Brad Larson last season. It's just implementing that system with a lot of new faces, and you did lose some guys that were around forever and really knew that system, and now all of a sudden you're putting people in a position, maybe a little higher in the lineup that they would have been in the past that are elevated and not used to play that system against the top line of the other team. And that's where it makes a difference. If you're a third line guy, and you know your system, it's fine with the matchups. But now all of a sudden, the season after, you're playing against first line guys, you're exposed a little bit more. So it takes time for a coaching staff to get there. And, I think, yes, you need to improve your defense, but it's not just the defenseman, the goaltender, it's also your forwards' commitment to play defense.
yeah, I think it also is interesting with Zach Werenski too. Just thinking about a guy who obviously was used to maybe having Seth Jones, obviously, and so he loses Jones, but a guy like Andrew Peak had a tremendous year in his first real full season, really all 82 games. But also Werenski, had the A, so he was probably probably getting used to his style or his play evolving with the team, the teammates around him, the way that he needed to play, when he was on the ice too. So, and I'm really curious across the board to just see how they all do, of course, and how everyone kind of takes that collective next step.
Yeah, and for Zach, I think losing Seth was I'm sure he wasn't happy about it, but it gave him a bigger role. He's a true number one defenseman on that team right now. But what I really like about it is like he really improved his defensive play. And a lot of times you think, oh well, if you're playing good defense, you can play good offense. Well, there's a guy called Kel McCarr that plays for Colorado, and honestly, I watch him all playoff long,
It's
and
insane.
I was absolutely stunned by how
Yeah.
good he is defensively. In his zone, he's not the biggest guy, but his stick positioning and the way he was able to cut plays every single time the puck was in his zone was really impressive. And that's what you saw with Zach last season. He became more responsible defensively in his zone, and on the long run, it's going to make him a much better defenseman. And it shouldn't hurt his offensive numbers.
Taking it kind of a step further, beyond the defense, of course, the goaltending, Elvis Merzlikins. So, what did you like, or what did you maybe see from his, I guess, his first year in terms of being the number one guy, I guess, going into the season and playing, throughout the season. Of course, Corpusalo, he struggled, but he also had the hip. Elvis was the guy that was getting the bulk of starts, and I thought played a lot better in April once he was kind of, Larson wanted him to be the guy, play all those games, kind of get used to carrying the load, the mental, all that stuff that goes with it. So, what did you think about Elvis his play last year, and of course, as he tries to take his step, this season?
Well, you look at the numbers, and I think he finished with a 907 save percentage, and Andre Vasilevsky finished with a 916, so 915. So it's only like 8.08%, whatever difference,
Yeah.
but it's a big difference. And yes, ideally, you'd like to see Elvis at a 910 this year or above. But how will that happen? He needs to see less shots because, the Blue Jackets allowed the second most shots all season in the league, which is really not acceptable given the talent level they have there. So less work on his end. Obviously, if he's seeing a few less shots a game. But for me, the big thing with Elvis is, like you said, in April, he learned that less is more. When he had to play every single night, every single game, he became a little less active in the net, more calm. And when you look at those good goaltenders, those elite goaltenders, they're almost boring to watch in that. And I think Elvis, he has that energy, and it's part of his personality. And we're not trying to take that away, but he's trying to do too much sometimes, when being calm and almost tired in net helps you play better positionally. So he's more calm, more always the puck is hitting you in the chest all of a sudden. You don't have to extend the arms and the shoulders and do the split, because when you look at Vasilevsky, it looks like everything hits him right in the middle of the body. And you're like, is he that big? Well, he's not. He's just always in the right position. As Elvis, especially early in the year, he was caught chasing side to side and, acrobatic saves. Well, that works for a couple, games here and there. But when you have to play 55, 60 games a year, it's not going to work because you're going to get tired. Well, he got used to that at the end of the year. So hopefully, when the season starts this year, he goes with that kind of like frame of mind, like, hey, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Let's keep it simple, and less is more. That's basically, if I were him, I would put that in my mask before I put it in. Less is more, just to remember. You don't need to dive left and right. If you're playing positioning sound hockey, everything's gonna basically hit you in the chest or near the chest.
So, what were you doing, or what was going through your mind the night that the Johnny Gaudreau news broke? Obviously, we started hearing the rumblings that day, earlier in the day, and I was thinking, okay, they might be serious. I still wasn't expecting it to really maybe happen, of course. And I was out. I remember I was out with a friend that night, and I think I was getting text messages. I think my Twitter was was going off. And I was just shocked. I didn't expect it. So, do you remember what you were doing that night?
Oh yeah, I remember we taped a free agent show with Bob. I want to say Jody and I, and we're just talking about the Gudbranson signing and all that stuff. And then Jeff River was on there as well. And we wrapped that up. And I left and I went over to the lake and went sailing with my son. And then he was on his sailboat. I was on a different sailboat. And all of a sudden, my phone is just blowing up on the shore. And my son's like, Dad, it's like Blue Jacket just made a big signing. And there's no wind. And I could not get to the shore fast enough to check my phone. And I'm like, who is it? He's like, I don't know. I don't know. I was literally in the middle of
Of course.
Hoover, and there's
Yeah.
no wind. It's July. It's not like it's that windy anyway. And I cannot get to shore.
Yeah.
And I finally just jumped off the boat and dragged it with me and swam to the shore to see that we signed Gaudreau. But yeah, that's how it happened. So I did not see it coming. We're pretty much done with our free agent frenzy show, and then next thing you know, we found out that he's here. So I'll never forget it. Every time I go sailing, I think about it.
There you go. So yeah, obviously we know how tremendous of a hockey player he is on the ice and what he can bring to this team. But talk about what it means for the team on the ice, but off the ice also. Just that impact because you know the narrative we've heard about like oh players don't want to be in Columbus. So obviously this helps change that a little bit. I know the important thing right now is wins on the ice and developing and all that, but talk about what this kind of impact can make for this team and this and of course the city.
Well, I think it's good uh, for the organization, but I think it's great for the city because it seems like the city of Columbus has been dumped on. Unless you talk about Ohio State football, it seems like, why Columbus? Even people back home are friends. I'll be like, why did you decide to stay to Columbus? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, why not? Right. So it's kind of funny. And I don't know if it's because we don't have an NFL team or Major League Baseball or NBA team. People don't realize how big of a city, how big of a city Columbus is in general. You look at all the big market, and I think we're 13 in the country, 13th largest city. But you wouldn't know if you look at the pro sports franchises that are in the city because of things in Cincinnati or Cleveland. So
Yeah.
for Columbus to get Johnny Gaudreau, huge for the NHL, but I think it's a huge win for the city in Columbus in general. Just like the Intel plant is bringing a lot of eyes on Columbus, I think Johnny Gaudreau is bringing a lot of eyes on the NHL side on Columbus as well. So for me, extremely happy, and hopefully it's going to help the organization in the future be able to bring big free agents and not be their third or fourth or fifth or seventh pick, but their first or second one instead.
As this team, the season's literally like a month away at this point. I think just about less than a month, really. With the season about around the corner, training camp, as we talked about, around the corner as well within a few weeks. What are you most curious about with this team? What are you looking for to see? In your kind of your burning questions, maybe.
Haha, burning questions. Will Line and Gaudreau be on the same line? that's a that's
Yeah.
a that's a big question that everybody wants to know. Uh, I'm looking at the goaltending situation. I cannot wait to see how Corpusalo is going to bounce back after the hip surgery. And, it was a tough season for him last year, obviously. So can he get back to his all-star form that we saw a couple of seasons ago? So that would be number two. Number three, I'm not sure. Honestly, this locker room, I cannot wait to see it. It's literally like everybody I talk to is talking about it and said they can't wait to see it. And I think I'm more excited to see it than some of the players probably. So can't wait to see it because I know they've put a lot of money down there, but it's completely changed. And hopefully we'll get the chance to broadcast some tour of the locker room there
Oh, I'm
on some of
sure.
our shows this year because I think it's something that's going to be pretty special and probably one of the best facilities in the NHL.
Yeah, I'm sure that it'll definitely be a feature for sure. Talking about the line, potentially line A and Gaudreau, like you said, it probably feels like that would happen, but I do remember Larson when they were introducing Gaudreau to the public in the media and everything. He did say, "I'm not, you never know how chemistry is going to play out, how alliance might look." And I mean, it feels like a no-brainer that those 2 would be on the first line, but also it could stretch the depth a little bit if you had maybe Gaudreau on line 1 and line A on the second line, for instance, because you have 2 big wingers on 2 different lines. That would be interesting if it played out like that.
Oh, absolutely. Because you look at on the wings, so you have Gaudreau, Line, Voracek, Nyquist, right? So you assume those are your top four there. But what happened if you're like, let's put Nyquist on the third pair instead, and then you move, a guy like Kent Johnson. Who knows how his camp goes? And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you have a Johnson that's with Gaudreau or Johnson with Line. You never know, and that's what's exciting about training camp is like, as a coach, you can put whatever you want on paper. As a GM, you can put whatever you want on paper, but until they're on the ice, you don't know how they're going to work out. So that's what you try to figure out there in those 2, 3 weeks of training camp. So I'm really excited to see how that's going to play out because, and again, it's a work in progress. They game number one of the season is probably not how the lines are going to finish at the end of the year, obviously, but it's gonna take time to get that chemistry, so you can't get frustrated as a coach or as a player.
When you're on the broadcast, obviously you're very professional, very polite. You seem very kind, obviously. But when you're watching games and like when you're not on the broadcast and you're watching this team, the good and the bad, does or if you see something like when the Jackets were getting at times, the Wild were just very physically taking it to the Jackets. Does it ever stir up something inside you to where it's like you want to just be out there or you want to throw helmets around or what do you think when you're watching these games?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it gets frustrating when things like that happen, and I just want to, you know, push Jody over the boards and tell him to jump in there because he's right between the benches there. That's for sure. But I'm not gonna lie. Now that I'm 45, a little older, a little smarter, I probably just stay out of these guys when just let them play the game the way they want it. Because I'd rather, as an analyst, I'd much rather watch a bunch of goals than having to describe some fighting happening on the ice. So, uh, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, honestly, what you see is what you get, having fun with it and watching the games. And yes, is it frustrating sometimes to see some of the stuff that happens on the ice? Of course it is. But, I don't sweat it anymore because, I'm not playing anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just
Well,
having fun watching hockey like everybody else at home.
exactly. Yeah, I can't wait. Season's almost here. Can't wait to watch the games again. It's gonna be here before you know it. Training camp's almost here, so we'll be seeing a lot of action here soon.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, just enjoy these moments before camp starts because this is the last
Yeah,
moment of peace
that's
you'll
true.
have till probably in the next 8 months. So enjoy the calm and then, yeah, get ready to, it's going to get crazy real fast. And, I don't know if you looked at the schedule, but whoa, it's going to be a busy one this year.
You know what? You're right. It's definitely enjoy the calm before the storm. But same to you. Hope you have a good rest of the off season. I know it's pretty much almost over, but keep crushing it. I can't wait to watch you on TV soon.
All right. Thank you.